Hi, we're back again, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how I created the forms that I showed you in the first video. So I'm in a folder in my file system here where I see the database file that we looked at previously, and then we're going to work from this file this time. Same database, the only difference is this one does not contain any forms. So I'm going to open the file, and I am going to enable content so I have the ability to work freely here. Excuse me. I look at the object bar. It's currently filtering for forms, and there are no forms. Again, just to show you, we have the 6 tables that we saw previously. If I go to the database tools page, click on the relationship diagram, it's the same database that you saw previously. The only difference is there are no forms. Okay, so I'm not going to attempt to create all the forms that I had in the database that I created previously, but if you recall, we focused on 3 tables: the customer table, the phone table, and the phone table and the pet table. So that's what I'm going to focus on this time, and I'm going to create a form that contains the customer table as the base element of the form, and then I'm also going to have a subform associated with pet and a subform associated with phone. Really the same way that I had things set up in the previous video that I demonstrated from. So I'll close up the relationship diagram, and now we look at how do we create forms. If you go to the Create page in Microsoft Access, there are a number of objects that we can create, and they are represented on various ribbons. There is a Forms ribbon, and there are a variety of ways that we can go about creating a form. If I were a VBA developer, someone that was developing a production database with a graphical user interface, then I would probably start out developing with a blank form. If I am working with Microsoft Access with a very limited understanding of programming and relational database, then I would probably work from the Forms wizard. And so the form wizard will take me through the necessary steps to create a form, and it will prompt me each step of the way in order to create whatever element is necessary along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Forms, and the first form I'm going to create now is going to be the form that is going to use the customer table as the base element. And so it's suggesting that the table is customer. Okay, now there's nothing magical about that. I think customer might well be the name that appears first in an alphabetized list. I'll check and see. Okay, so we have table customer, groomer, pet, and so forth, and that's exactly the case. That's why customer just so happened to come up. All right. So if the table that you want to create the base element of the form from is not the one that shows up by default, you can always expand the list and select from it. With customer table having been selected, all the fields that are contained within the customer table, in other words, all the columns that are contained within the customer element, are shown. And you see the column names as they were defined in the table structure. And since I'm going to want to populate every field in the table, with the exception, of course, of the primary key, which is an auto number field, I'm going to go ahead and click on the double arrows, and that will, with one click, tell the wizard that I need to build a form that contains all the fields of this table. And then I click Next. Okay, so you can see that this wizard is taking me through every detail that needs to be attended to, and it's doing it step by step. It's coaching me through every single detail. Now, the form can be created in a variety of formats, and I chose the default, and I'm going to choose the default this time around. But you see a representation of what that's going to look like here, and then you see a representation of what it would look like if I chose tabular format, so on and so forth. How do I say this? I can never make heads or tails of this, to tell you the truth. If you don't like the way the form presents itself when columnar format is selected, my suggestion is that you play around with it and choose some of these other options and go through the process of completely building the form and see what it looks like. But to try to interpret anything from this model, maybe you see it, I don't. This really doesn't do me any good. So, to move on, I'm going to choose the default columnar arrangement or format. Click Next. And it wants to know, what do I want to use as a title on the form? And at this point, I can't win, because I would like this form object named form_customer. There is a customer table object in the database. I'm about to create another object, and I would like to be able to distinguish between those two objects. So if I precede, in terms of identifying this object, if I precede the object name with FORM underscore, then when it shows up in lists that are available for me to work with, I'll see immediately that it's a form. Okay, so that's kind of an internal description that's going to be very useful. On the other hand, when the form is created, I want to make that form as clean and as readable as possible to the human being that's using it. And I would like for the form to have a title across the top that says customer. Well, whatever I choose here is actually going to be used in two ways. It's going to be used to identify that object in the database, and it's going to be used to identify the form, the name of the object and the title of the form. So I'm going to opt to call this form_customer. In doing so, when it creates the form, it's going to have a peculiar looking title, but that's okay. I know how to go into design view, which I need to show you, and I know how to tweak it. I know how to correct it, edit it, so that it presents itself in a more straightforward way to the user of the form. All right, so by choosing form customer, again, two things. Going to name it in the database as form customer, and it's also going to put that in the title. I'm going to say finish. And when I do, it puts it in the title, not what I want, but it labels the object as form customer. That's what I do want. So how do I correct this? Well, Everything that you see is the result of having used the wizard. Notice that the field names are exactly as they are described or as they were created in the tables. And that underscore may seem a little peculiar to the user. The user of the database is going to interact with this element of the form. So I might want to take these underscores out. I might want to take form underscore out of the title. And to do that, I need to go over to, I'm on the home page, I need to go over to the View button, click, and I have an option for Design View. And if I choose Design View, then it allows me to make some structural changes to the form. One structural change I'm going to make is to clean up this heading. Now, if I wanted to, I could change the font, I could change the font size, I could change the font color. You know, there's a whole lot of options that I have up here. I'm going to, keep it simple, and if you're intrigued by this, or if at some point in the future you need to develop a prototype in order to go out and gather user input into the design of a new system or a change to an existing system, you can explore all the details on your own. But for right now, I'm going to change that the text only. I'm also going to attempt to change the width of this. By default, and again, that's a favorite term used in computer science, default. That means automatically, this is what you are presented with automatically. The default is that this form is going to be about slightly less than 4 inches wide. I want to make it 11 inches wide. One way that I could do that is to drag on the form. Another way that I can do it, if I can remember how to do this, is to right-click on the tab up here, I believe, and get a, let me try a second approach. Alright, if I click in the form area here, I get an option for form properties. I'm looking for this pop-up menu that gives me an option for form properties. And if I choose form properties, then somewhere in the form properties I have a width property. And that current width property is 5.25. Okay, so 5 1/4 inches. I can change that to 11. Okay, so change that to anything I want to. I'm going to change it to 11 and hit the return key or enter key, depending on whether you're using a Mac or a PC keyboard, and automatically it expands that. I also have the ability to expand the detail area of the form, and I need to do that because in this form I've now created all the fields that are associated with the parent table, but I need to create 2 more subforms, one being associated with the pet table, which is a child table with respect to customer, and also another subform associated with phone, the table phone, which is a child table with respect to customer. So I need some more space, is what I'm saying. And so I'm going to mouse over this border area, and as soon as the mouse pointer changes to the form that you currently see, I'm going to continue to drag. Now there is no height property in that form property list, So I'm going to use the scale here, and I'm going to make this, oh, what the heck, 11 inches. Okay, so I've got an 11 by 11 inch form now created. Got lots of space to work with. And at this point, I want to put maybe the pet table fields down here. I want to create the subform associated with the pet table in the lower left, and I want to put the subform associated with the child table phone in the lower right. So how do I do that? Well, if we look at the menu bar up here, I'm scanning it right now so you get a good view of it. There is a down arrow. I'm going to click, and the tool that I need is right here. If I mouse over it, it says subform, subreport. I'm going to click on that tool. I'm going to drag somewhere in the vicinity that I, want to create the pet table subform in, and release, and it invokes a subform wizard. Again, I just found the subform tool in the toolbar, had to click on the down arrow, make the selection from the menu, drag onto the form, and this will begin the process of creating another set of fields associated with a different table, with a child table. And along the way, it will also allow me to synchronize the primary key of the base table, in this case the customer table, with the foreign key of the pet table, which happens to be customer ID. You'll see that unfold here in a minute. So, wants to know whether I want to use an existing table and query, and that's the only option I have, so not much of an option. Click Next. Now it wants to know what table or query, and we'll just kind of ignore the word query because we haven't had a chance to look at that yet. But we'll need to select a different table at this point. And if what we want to put in there is the pet table, I make the selection from the menu, and then it shows me all the fields of the pet table. I'm going to need to populate the pet table through this form, so I want all the fields put in. Tell it Next. And it says, what do you want to use as a linkage between the parent data and the child data? And it's suggesting that we use the foreign key, the primary key of the base table or the parent table, and the foreign key of the child table. That's exactly what I want to do. So to this step in the wizard in the dialog box, I go ahead and click Next. And then it says, what would you like for your subform name? I'm going to change this. I'm going to Control X, which will cut. I'm going to place the cursor in front of that name. I'm going to do a Control V. And I'm going to name this subform pet. Now I have form customer, and within customer there's going to be some subforms, subform pet being one, until it finish. And it says invalid name. I don't know what I did wrong. I'm going to try this. I think it's because maybe there's a leading space there. Just a little editing change may fix that. And now I'll try to say finish, and it's good. Okay, so something as seemingly insignificant as a leading space created a problem in this context. And I didn't even pick up on it visually that there was a leading space until I looked the second time. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it is a big heads up to you that, wow, you know, along the way there are many, many steps that have to be completed, and, you know, something as seemingly insignificant as a leading space there in a name is going to be problematic. All right, now what did it do? It created this subform component called pet. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take where it says subform out, and that is simply a label. It's not affecting the name over here at all. It's just a label. I'm going to change that to pet, and I might even want to call it pet table or something like that. Whatever you see fit to call it. But the important thing is it puts the subform in place, but that subform may not be quite sized quite correctly. It may not be positioned quite correctly. If I need to reposition it, I'm going to mouse over the border, and when the mouse appears like this, I'll have the ability to move the entire subform structure. If I need to expand the size or contract the size, I'm going to mouse over one of these sizing handles, these little squares on the border of the object, and in this case I'm going to stretch a little bit. Now I've got to get another subform in here, so I can't go, you know, totally crazy with this. I'm going to come down to this border area, grab the sizing handle, stretch down, and hopefully I have stretched this out enough that, yeah, and I have, that you know, all the fields can be displayed. Now here's what I know about working with forms and subforms. Try as I may, this, you know, is generated code. It is generating program code as I interact graphically. And try as I may, this thing has a mind of its own, and it's going to, you know, require numerous little tweaks to get it positioned just right, to get the columns expanded just to the right size. You know, we could have a full-blown course in creating a graphical user interface in Microsoft Access and learn all the ins and outs and details. That's not what I want to accomplish in this course. I want to teach you very fundamental things about a relational database, things that were true back in the mid to late 1970s when E.F. Codd, as a researcher at IBM, developed a relational database, things that remain true over time across multiple platforms. You know, I want to try to teach you fundamental things that are, for the most part, platform neutral, so that when you finish taking these courses, you're going to have a solid grounding in computer science as it relates to informatics. And instead of making you an expert on how do I get this particular area of the form positioned exactly the way I want it, I want to show you the basics of how to do this. If you need to do it on the job, you can figure out the details. You can Google for the details. I want to show you the basics of how to do this, and hopefully you'll be able to remember these fundamental things. You'll be able to apply these fundamental things. These fundamental things are going to give you the necessary background to study whatever details of the software you need to into the future. All right, didn't intend to go off on that particular sermon, but thought it was somewhat necessary because I have to deal with this a lot of times as a computer science professor. There is a discipline called computer science. There's a body of knowledge, fundamental knowledge, that is associated with that discipline. And there's also all kinds of technology that are used to implement those elements of the discipline. And many times people get totally wrapped up in the technology. That's the wrong approach. The technology changes. You should know from your own experiences at this point that about every 2 years, Microsoft, being a company that is in need of making money, is going to roll out a new product. And that new product is going to have some new features, some of the things that were included in the previous version of the product are going to be eliminated or changed. And it's a never-ending kind of battle to stay abreast of the technology. But if you understand the fundamentals, then you'll be able to adapt to all the changes that are going to occur. You know, it's a guarantee that they're going to occur in the future. So I'm teaching fundamentals. All right, enough of that. And so I've included the subform for the pet table in this general area of the form. And now what I want to do is come over to this general area of the form and create another subform that's associated with the phone table. So how do I do that? Same way I did before. I need to go up to the toolbar. I need to click on the down arrow so that it brings up the remaining tools. And I find the subform tool, and when I click on it, then come to the form and trace the outline. And I'm not going to be too precise about this. It'll invoke the subform wizard. Again, it asks, do you want to use an existing table or query? Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. This time I want to select pet table, and from the pet table I want to select all the fields, and I want the primary key of the customer table to be synchronized with the foreign key of the pet table. I don't know why they can't just say that in straightforward English. And I will rename this, being real careful this time. Highlight subform, Control C, actually Control X, and place the cursor in front of the P in pet and do a Control V. And I now have a consistent naming convention until it finishes. And it tells me the name already exists. Tell it OK. That's because I should have used the phone table. Alright, so I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to this table, and instead of choosing pet, I'm going to choose phone, which is what I should have done. And again, choose all the fields, and hopefully this does not add, but it goes ahead and replaces, and it did not. I'm going to go back, I may be able to delete these fields. Okay, so I'm going to click on pet. I'm going to hold down the shift key. Did not work either. I'm going to cancel this whole thing, and I'm going to try it once again. Now I'm going to have to delete this. Alright, so had I been paying attention, I would not have made that mistake, but having made that mistake, you have the benefit maybe of seeing how I'm going to recover from it. Tried to correct it within the wizard and it didn't work at all, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the border area around here now and delete, and try that again. And I will try that one more time using a different approach. And I will choose with a right click, click on the border area, right click, and now choose, I think delete would probably get rid of it. It did. Alright, so I had to jump through a lot of hoops to correct that mistake. I have, had I been paying attention to details and not getting so engrossed in what I was trying to explain, I have the pet table here. I need to create the phone table. So let me do this the right way this time. I'm going to go to the toolbar. Again, click the down arrow. Find the subform tool. I'm going to draw, just drag in this general area. It invokes the wizard. It wants to use an existing table. That's what I want to do. It suggests customer. That's my base table. I don't want to use that. I'm going to choose, this time I messed up before by choosing pet. I'm going to choose phone. It displays all the fields in the phone table. I need to access all those fields, so I choose the double arrows. Tell it next. Wants to synchronize the foreign key of the phone table with the primary key of the base table. That's exactly what I want. Tell it next. Wants to call it subform phone very carefully. I'm going to highlight subform without that leading space. Do a Control X to cut. Place the cursor in front of the letter P and execute a Control V, which will paste. And now I've changed the name of this subform object so that it's consistent with my naming conventions that I created previously. And tell it finish. There's the subform. That's what should have happened. Alright, now I'm very fond of telling my students in my traditional classes when I make a mistake that I'm a very experienced teacher and that I make these mistakes from time to time for the benefit of the students so they can see what will happen when they make a mistake. Your experienced students, I'm not going to try to convince you of that. I was clearly not paying attention to detail, chose the wrong table, and consequently got myself into a real jam. But if you go back and review this, I think that may be helpful, because if I made the mistake, likely you may make a mistake like this as well. And so hopefully my unintended mistake is going to be something that you're going to find useful. Alright, so I'm back to the point that we've seen before. No matter how I drag this thing out and stretch it, once the wizard completes its task, it always wants to make it whatever size it wants to, and I will have to do a certain amount of tweaking. Click on the border, get an active border, Sometimes this is very difficult to get the right focus. Okay, so I'm struggling here. Got the focus on the outer border. Once the mouse pointer appears in that form, then I should be able to stretch it two-dimensionally. If I go to a corner point and stretch, I can stretch both, horizontally and vertically. And I think at that point, I'm going to drag this out a little bit more, drag this out a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to be quite honest with you. When you get to this point, you're going to have to employ a technique known as twiddling. In other words, you're just going to have to go in here and play around with this in order to get these things to the proper size. I'm in design view. I now have a collection of form objects associated with the customer table, the parent table. I have a separate collection of form elements associated with the pet table, and I have yet one more collection of form elements associated with the phone table. And the primary key in the base table is synchronized with the foreign key in both of the subforms. And what I'm going to do now is, while on the design page, go over to the form pull-down menu and choose form view, and this is the view that the user will see. Now, this table could have been expanded, okay? So I could go back into design view and expand it, but I'm not going to. Those are all, things that you can do on your own. But let's go ahead and add one more record to the customer table. Right now it's showing record number 1, and the very bottom controls are the controls that are associated with this base table. Obviously these controls are associated with the child table, the pet table, and these controls are associated with the phone table. So what am I to do here? Well, I'm going to add a new base record, a new customer. So I'm going to come over here and click on this. And I'm going to make sure that I give it a name. So we'll name this person Schmo. And last name Schmo. And we'll call this person Jane Schmo. And I needed to go into design view and change this label a little bit, tweak this so that you can see the complete label. But this is asking for a customer count, so this is the first time Jane Schmo has been to the grooming shop, so we'll put a 0 in there. And she has a pet named Fluffy. I hit the tab key to advance to the next field. The breed is feline. It's not a breed. How about, I don't know, cats. I'm not a cat person at all. How about calico? I think that's a color of a cat. I don't know if it's a breed of cat. Don't really care. Put something in there. And I need to adjust this because I can't really see that label, so that needs to be a design time change. Let's see if I can make a slight adjustment here. And I'm going to use the scroll bar so you can see that there's a certain amount of twiddling or tweaking that I need to do to make this usable. Alright, so this is the temperament. Okay, hey, it's a cat. I've never seen a cat that didn't have a bad attitude. And the date of birth is 1/1/1900. You know, I've never seen a cat die of old age, so they always seem to live on and on. So that's the data that I'm entering in for the pet. And now I come over here. Notice again that the primary key and the foreign keys are synchronized. And I'm going to expand this a little bit. So this is the area code. So the area code for the customer, Jane Schmo, is going to be 765. Hit the tab key. Again, that should be expanded a little bit. Alright, so it wants a phone number, and I'll have to expand it later. So I'll put in 4567890. Hit the tab key, and the phone type is work. Hit the enter key. Alright, so once I get the forms and the subforms set up, they're an extremely convenient way to interact with the tables. It's a little tricky to get the forms set up, but with some effort you can do that. Now, I have entered in this record for Jane Schmo. Let's take a look and see what's in the tables at this point. I'm going to actually, just to make double certain, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the end record. Okay, and that should, if it wasn't already updating the tables, that should update the tables. Now if I go to the object bar, choose tables, check the customer table, I've got Jane Schmo. That was entered in through the form. Close that table. I go to the pet table, and there I have the old calico cat that belongs to customer number 6. Customer number 6 being Jane Schmo. And the phone number is what you see here, belongs to Jane Schmo again. So I was able to input all that data through a form, and I hope you can see that with a little effort, once you get those forms designed correctly, it's a whole lot easier to interact through a form than it is to have to interact through the table itself. Alright, so there is my form. I'm as happy as I can be with it. I'm going to click the Save button. And the last thing that I'm going to do, now this was a data entry form. The last thing that I'm going to do is to create a navigational form. This is new to Access 2012. Okay, I've used Access for a number of years, and this navigation form option was not available in previous versions. I like this a lot. There are ways to create navigational forms in previous versions of Microsoft Access, but this simplifies things tremendously. So if I had several forms, you know, something comparable to the form that we just created, if I had several forms like that, then I'd like to be able to switch from form to form, and I would want some navigational controls. I would go to the form ribbon on the Create page, choose Navigation, and it gives you a preview of how to do this. What I chose was to use vertical tabs left. There's nothing, you know, about this that makes it any better than this option or any of the other options. This just happens to be the option that I chose. And when I do, it brings up navigation form, tells me to add new, and I'm going to filter for forms. And I'm going to drag and drop my customer form on here, which also brings in the subforms for subform pet and subform phone. Drag and drop, and there we have it. Now, if I had more forms, I could drag them, drop them. I can, arrange the order whichever way I want. But this navigation form would be the first form that the user sees, and then if the forms are named in a descriptive way over here, it should be clear to them if they want to perform a certain procedure that they invoke, a particular form from that list. Alright, so all I have is one form to work with, and that's the best I can demonstrate with at this point. At this point, I'm going to do a final save, and it is wanting to save this form as navigation form. I'll say OK. Now, actually, before I end this video, let me just say one more thing. Having set up this navigation form, it is a form. I can go to View, I can go to Design View, and I see it says Navigation Form, and maybe what I want to call it is Form Navigator. So I can go ahead and change the title. I can change these things. Maybe I don't like the underscores down here. I can take out the underscore and replace it with a space. I can stretch the size of any of the text boxes or labels. And when I'm all done in Design View, I'm going to save and then flip back over again on the design page. Flip back over to the form view. And now I see that it says Form Navigator here, and I see that the underscore has been taken out of here, still there and there and there, but this is an example of what I can do to make it a little bit cleaner and clearer for the user. Alright, well that's the final word as far as I'm concerned on using the form objects in Microsoft Access. And there's another very similar kind of object that we'll look at later on called a reports object, but for now you know how to create a graphical user interface. Hopefully you see the benefit, making it easier to access table data, and also it provides a very quick way of setting up a graphical user interface in order to demonstrate to other people and gain other people's input when you're called upon as a informatics nurse to gather client input for the either development or the substantial changes that might be made to existing software. All right, I will see you again in a future video.